Hey guys, it's the Handicapable Gamer back here with you again, and today I'm bringing you my thoughts and impressions on Paranormal Activity: The Lost Soul for PlayStation VR. Now this is a game that already came out on the Rift and the Vive, and got some pretty decent reviews, so a lot of people were excited when it was announced for PlayStation VR. But does it live up to the hype? Let's dive in and find out. First, let's talk about the good aspects of the game. Graphically, the game is quite polished. Not mind-blowing, but definitely high quality, and the graphics are enough to immerse the player, much in the same way that Resident Evil did, where you actually feel like you're in the house. I was especially a fan of the lighting and shadow effects, which I thought were top-notch. The sound was also on par with the graphics, and effectively added to the immersion. But the biggest selling point of the game, of course, is the fear factor. Since this is a horror game, with branding for a franchise behind it that carries a lot of weight nowadays, people want to know that if they buy it, it will be frightening. The game itself relies heavily on jump scares, and uses the downtime in between those scares to build up a sense of dread. I was definitely on the edge of my seat during the whole playthrough. So in that aspect, the game absolutely accomplishes what it sets out to do. Now, let's go into some of the negatives of the game. First and foremost would be the immersion breaking. For a game that can so effectively manipulate the player and make it feel as though you're in the environment, it saddens me to say that it can just as easily take you out of the environment. When you're walking around the house, you will be able to interact with certain objects, but only certain objects. For example, you might open a drawer and then come to find out that the other 6 drawers around it don't open and can't be interacted with at all. The same goes for doorways. There are certain ones you can open, but the majority of them are locked. And I don't really understand the logic behind this choice from the developers. The game is designed for virtual reality, and by its very nature, virtual reality is supposed to make the player feel as though they're part of the world. And in reality, we would be able to open any drawer we wanted. So by having so many things inaccessible, it really damages the immersion credibility of the game. I can only assume that this was a cost and time-saving measure, but it definitely pulls the player out of the experience. For me, the gameplay itself is also a negative of sorts. The majority of the time you're wandering around the house with your flashlight, and going along with the comment I just made about object interactions, the whole game is walking around the house and searching with your flashlight, then that means there should probably be plenty to interact with, and that's just not the case. So if you were trying to explore the house thoroughly, you could get bored or discouraged by the fact that certain areas can't be seen. I also don't love the way that the batteries are handled for the flashlight. I understand that they need to be realistic and the batteries die, so the player should change them. That's great. But they don't allow you to change the batteries once the flashlight starts flickering. You actually have to wait for it to die, which I think is somewhat silly. Also, I wanted to note that I did have some tracking issues while playing, but I'm not going to say that that's entirely the fault of the game, because it could have been my setup. I think the biggest drawback for me when it comes to this game was the move control implementation. The button layout itself is better than some games we've gotten, but there's no smooth turning. That's right, guys. There's not even an option for smooth turning whatsoever. The face buttons on the move controllers are used effectively for walking forward and back and turning and crouching, but the turning is the issue. There's no smooth turning option, and since the game plays out like a haunted house, I see no reason why smooth turning could not have been implemented to make you feel like you're walking realistically. For turning, you're given 3 options, which I believe are at 30 degrees, 45 degrees, and 90 degrees. And since it's a click-based turning, every time you hit the button, the screen goes black, again, breaking the immersion. For forward movement direction, you have the option to lead with your head or your hand, but the head option seems more natural to me because it's easier to look where you want to go than have to point. I think that smooth turning could improve this game drastically, so I hope that it comes in a future update. All in all, Paranormal Activity: The Lost Soul is not a bad game, and there's some fun to be had, especially if you're a horror fan. If you're looking for the next scary virtual reality game, this might be a good one for you, as it definitely employs a lot of solid jump scares and tension building. However, for those of you looking for the next AAA horror game like Resident Evil, you may be disappointed. The game does a good job at making you feel as though you're walking through a haunted house at the times when it's not breaking immersion. So it is worth playing, but because of the immersion breaking, the lack of smooth turning, and poor object manipulation in the environment, coupled with a shorter gaming time, the game can be beaten rather quickly if you know what you're doing. I would say you're looking at 2 hours maximum, but your mileage may vary. Therefore, I think the game would be better priced at $20 as opposed to $40. Now, right now during the launch window, you can get it for $30. So if this seems like a game that's for you, I'd recommend picking it up while you can. I should also mention that from what I can see, there's no option to use the DualShock 4. So if you're a player that has to use the PS4's accessibility control schemes, you're probably out of luck on this one, since it has to use the move controllers. Therefore, it may not be accessible for everyone, so I just wanted to make sure that that was said. The game has a lot of potential, and I will be curious to see where they can take it with future updates. Well, there you have it, my review of Paranormal Activity: The Lost Soul. I want to thank you guys for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. And until next time, this has been the Handicapable Gamer, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks.